Hey there, and welcome back to my channel realifeish. Today I'm going to be looking at the topic of the challenges of being a mum. I have had my fair set of challenges in my journey of parenting. A lot of challenges. I'm specifically going to be looking at some of that with my first son in the former stages of his life. So I would say the first 4 years of his life before he started school. It was a very trying time for me. I went through a mix of emotions and I went through a mix of challenges. And I'm really hoping that those out there that are going through a lot of challenges with their children, whether you're a mum or a father, may find some peace in what I'm sharing, or some strategy, some tips, or even if you just feel like you're not alone. I hope that some of my story will bless you. Let's rewind time. Let's start from the beginning. I was newly married and I had my son. And when you have your firstborn, it's obviously new, it's exciting, it's overwhelming, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. You're bringing life into the world. And I honestly loved it. I was, just in awe. In fact, I couldn't even sleep for the first few days because I was in so much awe of just this thing that, I went halves in creating, and it's partly me. And it's just the most beautiful experience. And I was just so mesmerized. And the first few years were beautiful because they hit all their first milestones and it's such a joy and you just love it. But in the midst of loving it, it was some of the most trying times of my life. And I honestly felt like I was a bad mom. I felt like, why was I given this type of child? I had all kinds of thoughts. Some of it ungodly thoughts, some of it wrong thoughts, but I just felt like, why am I going through this, right? And so I was newly married, as I said, and it was a very difficult time in my marriage, even though it just begun. Life wasn't really going the way I wanted it to. And there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of hurt feelings. I was navigating life as a new wife, as a new mum, and just absolutely struggling through it as well. And one of the things that started off a negative journey to my parenting journey was the words of others. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. We have to be so careful what we speak over ourselves, over others, and especially over other people's children. And, because of some of the challenges I went through in my marriage at the time, there was a lot of voices and opinions and people saying things like this, you need to look out for your son because he might take after his dad, and you need to look out for some of these attributes and some of these characteristics because it would mean X, Y, Z in your child. And you know what, your child will be like this. You need to prepare yourself for this and for that and for this. It was negative after negative after negative. And a lot of these negative things came before my child could even talk. And so I am not going to say that the whole part of my issues with my son is all people's words, because I don't believe anyone has that much power. But I do believe it plays a part because there is power in the tongue. We can cause curses with our tongue. That's why we have to be so careful what we say over other people's children, right? But it definitely played a part. And as I said, my child couldn't even talk yet, and I was told that he wouldn't do this or he would do that, or and there were a lot of negative things. And sometimes people do come from a caring place, and sometimes people come from a well-intentioned place, but sometimes people just lack wisdom. They really do, and don't obviously understand the lasting devastating impacts that can have. And some of these people were family. Some of these people were trusted, people that I had in my circle. Some of these people were spiritual ranking. They, may have had good intentions, but may not have had the desired results. And so that's where it sort of started. And it started to seed within me, because I was looking out for things with my child. I was paranoid. I was nervous, thinking he's going to be like this, he's going to be like that. Anyway, he did have a lot of struggles, and he did hit a lot of the physical milestones, like he was crawling, he was walking on time, all of those physical milestones. But in terms of his speech, for example, that took a lot longer. And we had to have speech therapy. We had it privately as well as with the NHS. And he really struggled with his speech. He struggled with sort of other aspects of his development. And I found this very trying. I found it quite lonely, because it kind of felt a bit like, my gosh, some of these words that people have spoken are coming to pass. This is what I'm experiencing. Another really challenging aspect was when when he was acting out with his behavior. I don't know if it was from frustration. I don't really know the reason as to why, but he would lash out. you know, so bad to the point he would come up and hit me, you know, literally come up and hit me all the time. I was so embarrassed that I didn't even want to take him to parties. I didn't want to take him out with me because I was like, oh my gosh, you know, what does this even say about me as a mum? You know, the shame surrounding it, the isolation surrounding it was a very heavy burden to carry. And I just remember all of these words and negative words. And then, you know, you also told things that, you know, sometimes this stuff can be generational. Sometimes it's the sins of the forefathers. Sometimes it could be that someone's cursed your child. There was so much information. And I'm not against the aspects of the spiritual because, you know, I believe in ancestral things. I do believe in generational curses. I do believe some of the things can come through our lineage and things like that. I am not negating that, and it has its place. But at the time, it was so much information overload. And I didn't really know how to deal with a lot of these things, you know. So I just remember feeling like that mum that had failed. That mum that, I don't even know why I have this kind of child. You know, some thought he was even demon possessed. That's how bad his behavior was. And I don't share these things in a way of, you know, it's a bit uncomfortable for me, if I'm being totally honest with you, because I want to protect my child. And even though he's nothing like that now, and thank God he's come such a long way, he doesn't lash out anything like that. Ever since he started school, he was a completely different child in a lot of ways, right? But no matter what, I'm still releasing this out there, and it's not something that is comfortable. This is me sharing it within my discomfort. But, you know, this was my story, and these are the things I went through, and I'm sure there's others out there going through very similar things. It was that bad that even at nursery, he was kicked out because they said that, you know, I think he hurt a child unintentionally, but she had a bit of a bruise. And I think, you know, a combination of some of his behaviours, they were like, look, you know, he's going to have to leave our nursery setting. And that was so distressing for me, you know, so distressing, because they said it's not something that's ever really happened before. So I really felt like, what is going wrong here? You know, what is going wrong? Why is my child like this? And, you know, it's very difficult sometimes because of our own pride. And I know I sure had pride. I really struggled with knowing how to admit this, because I thought, actually, if I admit or tell people about how he's acting, then that might mean that some of these people's words were true. And that would mean I also have to accept that some of these things are true about my husband, and da-da-da-da. And it just was a very overwhelming stage of my life to be in. And so, you know, sometimes we go through these things for many reasons. There's many layers to why we go through what we go through, but sometimes it's a very humbling journey. You know, I was one of these people that had it all set out how my life was going to be. You know, get married at this age, my husband will be like this, my son's going to be like this, my daughter or whoever, if I have a daughter one day, this is how it's all going to be. And we all have these pretty pictures in our head. And sometimes these things get completely destroyed. Our ideals get completely brought down to a reality. And a reality that we have to now navigate because life hasn't quite gone the way we hoped it would. So it was a very humbling process for me in the midst of all my trials and tribulations. And so, sorry, just going back. So he went from nursery to a childminder setting. It was a smaller setting. He was able to get a bit more targeted help. And, you know, in that time, I was trying everything. You know, I thought, oh my God, you know, like I said, he had private and NHS speech therapy, and that was not cheap when we did it privately. We did so many different things. He did have the prayers. We did have the deliverance. We did have the prophetic words. We did have, I prayed, I fasted. I was like, what is going on? And we also even, I mean, I took him to have a private health scan. And that was very beneficial, very beneficial. That was very insightful, you know, because sometimes we can tackle things in the spiritual, and I think all things have a spiritual root, most definitely. But things are sometimes multi-layered, you know. Even in having that scan, it was brought to my attention that he had high levels of mercury, which I was told came from the vaccinations. And I am not anti-vaccination, by the way. I think every parent has to do what's best for them. But it helped me to have a more informed understanding of vaccinations. And, you know, everyone's body breaks things down in very different ways. You know, sometimes some people's body can break down aspects of components of what's in the vaccine. Whereas for him, there was a high level of mercury. And that can impact your brain function. It can impact, you know, your development in some ways. And so I had to go through a journey of detoxing him. And I believed in a lot of that health stuff. I spent so much money trying to give him, you know, because I heard there was negatives about pesticides, and pesticides are on all non-organic fruit and veg. So I went through that journey of trying to now give him all, I spent so much money. I was in the farmer's market spending like £70 on just his groceries alone. I was also told things like, meat, meat has a link to aggression in children, and gluten this and gluten that. And once again, I don't say all of these things to say there's anything wrong with meat or anything wrong with gluten. At the end of the day, you have to do what's best for your child, and it's not a rule fits all, right? Some kids will be fine with a million vaccines and fine with whatever diet, and other children are not. And so the point is, in my point of desperation, I was trying everything. So my child up to this day doesn't eat meat. He has a very, good diet. I strip back dairy, and as he's got older, I've become a little bit more relaxed with things. He's got into some biscuits, and he does have some ice cream that isn't always dairy. But at the time, I was so strict with it, and I tried so many different things to try and help with whatever was going on, because I didn't have the answers for what was going on. And God is so faithful. It was such a long journey of multiple things going on at once, but it was also a journey where God brought me to my lowest points, because so much was going wrong around me. And sometimes, like I said, we just have to mourn the life that we think we're going to have and see, and then there we find the beauty. And then there we find looking at things from a very different perspective. I felt like such a bad mum. And can I just say, no, I'm not a bad mum, but of course there's things I had to take responsibility for. During that time when he was a lot younger, I was a very angry person. I had carried so much anger from my childhood, so much anger from some of the things I'd seen. I think this was also around the time when my brother was murdered when my son was 2. My marriage was a mess, even from the very beginning. I went through so much. I was part of the problem, not blaming just my ex-husband. He had his horrible ways. I saw some horrible ways in myself, and everything just felt like it was going wrong around me. And when you have a child in the midst of this, they are absorbing things. They are picking up on your spirit. And so I think I did have my part to play in perhaps some of his aggression. We're not, without a doubt. Do I believe in ancestral curses and things like that? Absolutely. And so deliverance and prayer definitely has its place. But one thing is that life is not this sort of linear thing. Yeah, it's not a one rule fits all. Some people have a child with some difficulties, go for prayer one day and everything goes away. God's just performed a miracle, and he's more than capable of doing that. And for others, sometimes healing takes a really long time. It's a process of time. And for others, some things we just have to live with, because we have to learn to accept things we don't always understand. And I do believe that things are multi-layered. And that's why I did look and tackle things on many different levels. And I am so grateful to God that my son has, it's been a journey, but he's not where he used to be. Are there some areas of his development that we're still working on? Absolutely. And I trust God for his total breakthrough. And something, even if that total breakthrough never comes, God is still good. Life is not perfect. And one of the things that I've had to learn, and I really hope you take something from this, is that we have to give ourselves grace as human beings, especially as parents. It's really hard. It's really hard. We can be so hard on ourselves as mothers and fathers because we really just want to get it right all the time. But honestly, I saw some parts in myself that I was like, whoa. Not only is marriage an amplifier, parenting will make you look at yourself in a whole different way. I've said some things I wasn't meant to say. I've shouted. I thought some thoughts I shouldn't think. I found my child at times a real big pain. I found him extremely frustrating. I would say, why me and why is he like this? I've had those thoughts. I've had those feelings. And I want you to know that they're pretty normal. It doesn't make you a bad parent. Of course, there may be some things we have to change. Look, I acted a certain way in some of my behaviours because I also had that experience when I was a child. Sometimes learnt behaviours are a very deep-seated thing that I've had therapy, I've had prayer, and some things are so hardwired that it's a journey. I'm still asking God to change certain aspects of how I parent. So, for example, my dad, when it came to schoolwork, he was so difficult. He was not the nicest when it came to doing schoolwork. He was very easily frustrated, very easily triggered. He would shout at me. He got so frustrated with me. And I mirrored that same thing with my son. It's so triggering for me to do schoolwork with him sometimes, even up to this day. Yes, I've got better, but sometimes I had to be like, oh my God, I've become my dad. The very thing I despised, and now I'm doing it with my son. So there are some things that we need our own counselling. We need our own therapy. And so as I share all of this, these are some of the things that I have done to help me. Maybe you can take something from what I'm saying to help you. So what am I suggesting to help you? Number one, I think, listen, give yourself some grace. You are not a bad parent. You are not a bad mother. You're not a bad father. You are a human being. And you have to accept yourself, flaws and all. And also accept your child, flaws and all. You know, we as parents, we want to, you know, really pretty up our children and, you know, want the best, and we can get a bit proud with it, you know, and we don't even want to accept that they're not the best. We want to believe they're the best in everything. I think sometimes we just need to take a bit of humble pie. Our children have flaws. Our children have their own characters. Our children have their own setbacks and their own beautiful ways. And so we both have to give each other grace, right? It's a journey. It's not a destination. I say this all the time. And so pray over your children. Pray for your children. If you do see certain things that are, you know, repetitive in the generations, then yeah, maybe it does need to be broken. It maybe needs to be broken by a spiritual power higher than you. I have prayed and fasted for my son. I have had a lot of spiritual insights that I'm still tackling, right? And sometimes it's an ongoing journey. I'm not going to get too into that. It's a very private thing, and I have to protect my child in that way, right? So I'm not going to be open about that. But you would know if some things are coming in the lineage, or coming from their forefathers, or coming from their dad's aspects, or their mum, or whoever, right? And so there is a place to deal with that in the spirit, absolutely. And there are some things you can do in the natural. Yeah, maybe like me, you might think, actually, my child does need some sort of detoxes. Maybe there are some things that we can tackle in that way and cut out some sweets or whatever it is you need to do, right? And there is nothing wrong in investing in help. Get them the tutor if they're struggling in maths. Get them a speech therapist if they need it. Sometimes it really is utilizing what you can in the natural. I did everything I could in the natural and everything I could in the spiritual. It's also the acceptance, though, of the things you can't change. And sometimes people can get their instant healing and the instant miracle, and sometimes we have to live with certain things, and we have to learn to make peace with that. You know, I think another really important thing is learn to see your child through the lens of God, not through your own perspective or how you hope things to be, but why has God given you this child? All children are geniuses, but they're going to be geniuses in different ways and different things. My child is an amazing person. My child is one of the most empathetic children ever. I may not have appreciated that when he was very young, didn't really see those qualities at the time, in fairness, but he's got so many gifts. He's fantastic at swimming. You know, his swimming teacher said he's got some of the, you know, some aspects of how he swims is something they haven't seen before. Do you know what I mean? And my child is gifted in just various ways. You know, he's got a beautiful voice. He's got a knack for reading music. But he's not the greatest at maths. He's not the greatest at, you know, writing sentences or comprehending all things. He's not. And it is hard to sometimes accept these things. And do I hope he gets better? Am I trying to do what I can to push him in those areas? Absolutely. Yeah, because I do want him to do well. But sometimes we have to remember that how we see things, or even how the government systems have set our schools in place. Schools are beautiful, schools have their place, and we're not knocking it, but not all of our children are going to fit into these milestones that they've created. You know, at this age, you know, this is the number that they must get in their exams and all of that. And it's like, well, unfortunately, not all children are going to fit that criteria. That doesn't make them any less than. So I think it's about redefining what is parented, redefining our children's development. I now have to praise my child according to his progress, not measure him against other people. That's another thing. Stop comparing. I got to a point where there was just no point comparing. My child is unique to being himself, and I had to love and appreciate him for that and not feel the shame, remove the shame around it. Because at the end of the day, this is God's child. He has a purpose and a beauty in being here. And you have to celebrate their differences. And so that's what I think is really important. You know, really just channel their gifts, channel their positives, find it. Even if it's just that one thing, go with that one thing. Give thanks for that one thing. And also mourn and accept where they may not be positives, right? Or they're not hitting the milestones you want them to hit, or they're not doing well in areas that you want them to do well in. Right? You have to learn to accept it. Another thing I suggest is positive affirmations. Speaking life over that situation. Speaking life over your children. Even the things you can't see. Well, they are great. They are lovely. Even if they're not acting so lovely, they are lovely. Yeah, going against your natural flesh and your natural inclinations to speak the negative. Get into a habit of speaking positive over their life. Right? of really believing, get those prophetic words that you may have had over your child, speaking it over them, really believe in it, speaking their healing, speaking transformation, you know, having a community. Listen, I've realized I try to do a lot of things solo with my first child. I've humbled over time. It takes a village. It takes a community. Yeah, you can't do everything alone. Ask for help. Utilize your family. You don't have family, you have friends. Find your family, find your tribe. Ask for help. Take a break. Be easy on yourself. Of course, yes, accept if there are areas you need to change. But, you know, one misconception is that, you know, a child is a reflection of their parents. Not always. Yes, in some ways, I had to look at myself. I had to ask God for forgiveness and I had to adjust my ways, right? But not in all things was it me. Some things just are the way they are. There's not everything that has an explanation. My child wasn't a complete reflection of me. I was a completely different child to him, right? And not every element of me or his dad is in him. He was just his own individual. Something just couldn't be explained. Do you know what I mean? Like, my child from very young was lashing out. People thought he was demon possessed. That's how bad it was at times, you know? And it was so embarrassing. And I think it's really important to just be able to be open about these things, to be able to share how you're feeling, you know, because I felt embarrassed, I felt ashamed, I felt isolated, I felt overwhelmed. I felt like in maybe saying these things, what does it say about me? But actually what it just says is you're human. And it doesn't matter whether your child is neurodiverse, neurotypical, whatever challenges, we're all going to have them as parents. Whether it's a small thing or big thing, we all have those feelings at times of inadequacy, of not doing enough, or feeling like, if I say this, what does it say? Listen, I have no shame in admitting I haven't always been a great mum. I haven't always got it right. I haven't always said the right things. And I've had to ask God for forgiveness on that. But then I pick myself back up and I walk again. Because you know what? It's not easy. It's not easy. And so to everyone listening to this video right now who's going through some sort of challenge with their child, you are not alone. If you haven't learnt this by now and you're new to my page, I do one-to-one sessions. Please navigate the links. Please have a look at my website. I do one-to-ones. If you want to know a little bit about my journey and how I navigated as a young mum, please book a session with me. If you are going through so many different things with your child, feel free to book a session with me for me to be a sounding board for you. I am very passionate about this. I have a lot of grace around this, a lot of compassion around it. And honestly, if you are that mother or that father struggling and feeling bad, please don't. You are doing a great job. And remember, your child is a genius. Your child is a blessing. I don't care in which way they are packaged. They don't have to be like everybody else. Some of the greatest people out there, some of the most life-changing people out there are not like everybody else. And even if your child fits the norms and is like everyone else, you would have your own challenges. But there is beauty in every single child. And I want you to know that you are not alone and you are doing a great job. There are so many different things, some of the things that I've shared, some of the things I may not have shared yet, or there may be other strategies and tips, but try and just find that there's so much help out there. There are different community groups, there are different workshops, reach out for help. And if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I will help in the best way I can. So please be encouraged. Life is a journey. It's not a destination. We don't get everything right. We are flawed human beings striving towards doing better. And sometimes we don't always get the answers the way we want or the change the way we want. But there is even grace in that journey and there's beauty in it. So please don't be discouraged. Please be blessed by this video. Please share, please like, please subscribe. Would really appreciate it as I navigate this journey. It's very new to me. And I just pray that you be blessed. May God bless you.